Hey guys, in this video we are going to be going through fraction word problems with bar models day 3. I'm going to cover the first two examples in this video, and we're going to show you two alternate methods for solving the first problem, and you can pick whichever one you want to use, which one makes more sense to you. I'm going to be using the second one because I think that's ultimately easier based on some of the other problems that we'll be solving. Let's take a look. So in this first problem, it says Lillian has a part-time job. Each month, she's spending a third of her earnings on clothes. She saves 3/8 of the remainder and spends the rest of her earnings on food. If she earns $540, how much does she spend on food each month? There is a lot of information in this problem, so let's break it down over again. But first, let's start with the 1/3 of her earnings is spent on clothes. So if we just draw a bar model and we say, all right, let's make a third of that clothes, first of all, we kind of need to know that the entire bar is her monthly earnings. A third of that, so I can cut it into 3, was spent on clothes. So I'll mark that down. A third of her earnings was spent on clothes. Here comes the interesting part. It says she saves 3/8 of the remainder. Now, the remainder right now is those two parts right there, and I'm going to pull that down to be a separate model. Now, this method we've been doing a lot. I'm going to first show this problem using this method, but then I'm going to show you the same problem again with an alternate method that I think ultimately will become easier for you. So let's take a look. Now, this says that 3/8 of the remainder was saved. Now, 3/8 of the remainder means take the remainder and cut it into 8 pieces. 3 of those 8 pieces was saved, and then the rest was spent on food. The rest of the remaining was spent on food. Now, the next sentence says that, or the next piece of information says that if she earns $540, which that's going to be her total monthly earnings at the top of my model, then how much does she spend on food, which is the bottom of my model, just that section. So I have to kind of start at the top and go all the way down until I can figure out how much is that food worth. So let's start with the thing that we're looking for, and that's that Lillian spends blank dollars on food each month. That's my target. How much is she spending on food each month? Now, if we look at the whole bar, we can see that the whole bar is worth $540. You want to start with the thing that you actually know. I know the $540. So I also know that that's worth 3 units currently. That's worth those 3 little boxes. So if I divvy that 540 out to those 3 boxes, I'll figure out what 1 unit is worth. That means dividing it out into 3 units. So I'm going to divide 540 by 3. When I do that, I get 180. Now that tells me what each of these boxes are worth. They're each worth $180. I like to write it in the box because it helps me. Now I can see that the remaining is 2 of those boxes. So those 2 units are both worth 180. So together, if I double it, I will get 360, which is the amount that was left over. That's the remaining amount. It's $360. I doubled the 180 to get that because it's worth 2 of them. I'm getting closer to figuring out how much the food is worth. Now here's where it gets weird, and this is one of the reasons that I am not a fan of this strategy for solving this type of problem. You have to kind of start over with your unit statements because these units down here are different types of units. They're a different size. So if you look, there's 8 there. So I would start with there's 8 little units worth $360. The 2 big units at the top were worth $360, but these units are smaller, and since the remainder is 8 of them, I would say 8 little units is worth $360. And then I can also figure out what 1 little unit is worth by dividing that 360 out to the 8 groups. Just like we did above with the 540 to the 3 groups, here I'm dividing 360 into 8 groups. So if I divide 360 by 8, I get 45. That means each of those little boxes is worth $45. So I'll fill those in. So I can see that the saved is worth 3 of those 45, but really I'm just concerned with the food. The food part only is 5 of those boxes. So the 5 little units is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to multiply that 45 times 5 to figure it out. And 45 times 5 is equivalent to 225. So that's how much she spent on food. Now this method got me the right answer. It's similar to what we've been doing. My only beef with it is it can get a little clunky depending on what kind of problems we're doing. So let me show you an alternate way to do the same problem. Starts out very similarly, okay? We're still going to start with the 1/3 of our earnings was spent on clothes. So still do the whole bar. The whole bar is still worth our monthly earnings. We're still doing 1/3 of it. So that part didn't change. And 1/3 of it is going to clothes. Absolutely identical first step. It's how I deal with the remainder that's different. So the next part is 3/8 of the remainder was saved. So if I just look at the remainder bar, I see that the remainder part of the bar is currently 2 units. But I need it to be in eighths, meaning I need it to be in 8 pieces because it says 3/8 of the remainder. So I need those 2 units to become 8 units. The only way I can do that is if I cut them into smaller units. So if I cut them both into 4, that makes a total of 8. Now I did not I did dashed lines to kind of show that I'm cutting the units further down. And now I have 8 pieces for that remainder. So when I say 3/8 of the remainder, well, now it's just 3 of those 8 is the part that went to saves, okay? And then the rest, the other 5, was spent on food. So now you can see how I didn't have to bring the whole model down. I didn't have to do any of that. I was able to continue to work on the exact same model without doing anything, just by breaking the remainder bar up more. So again, it's giving me that the 540 was earned. So that's my top. And it's asking me how much she spent each month. So I'm looking on food. So that's my target, and that's what my answer sentence should be, just like it was in the last one. So here's how you can see that the unit statements are going to be a lot less work here. The unit statements need to start with what I know, which is that the whole thing is worth $540. But the question is, how many units is that? Now, the problem is that the units are currently 2 different sizes. I have the little units that I made in my remainder, and I have the big 1/3 unit that I made when I first started. And in order to do these unit statements and divide this stuff out evenly, I need everything to be the same size. So what I need to do is I need to go in and actually cut that first unit into the same number of units, 4. So I've basically made an equivalent fraction. Instead of 1/3, I've made 4/12. But that part is not, that part you don't even need to worry about. The point is I've cut the units so that they're the exact same as the remainder units. That way I can have all equal units across the entire model. And there's 12 of them. If you count, it went from being 3 units to 12 units because they were all cut into 4s. How does that help me? Well, now all I have to do is find one of those units by dividing by 12, right? Because now I'm dividing the 540 out into 12 little units, and that 540 divided by 12 is 45. Sound familiar? And now that 45 is going to get filled in for the entire thing. Every single one of those little units is worth 45, and I can fill it in. And then I can see, okay, that food part is the 5 of those 45. So that's 5 units, and now I'm just going to multiply 45 times 5 to get my answer, and it is the same answer, 225. So I like this method better than the first one because there's not as much to it. I don't have to have like different size units in my writing. I have different size units in my model only. And I don't have to bring down the whole remainder bar and redraw it. I can just draw it within it. So let's try another one similar to this and see more about what I'm talking about. All right, so question number 2 is about Max, and it says Max spent 3/5 of his money in one shop and then 1/4 of the remainder in another shop, and then he had $90 left. how much money did he have at first. So breaking it down a step at a time, let's start with the fact that 3/5 of his money he spent in one shop. So if I have a model, the model is worth Max's money, and 3/5 of that money was spent in a shop. So I'm going to cut this into fifths. That's 5 pieces, and then 3 of those 5 was spent in a shop. Easy, first part, okay. Next part, this is where it gets tricky. A quarter of the remainder is in another shop. Now the remainder, again, is cut into just 2 pieces. But I need it, because I want 1/4 of the remainder, I need it to be cut into 4 pieces. The only way to do that is to cut them each into 2, because that makes 4 pieces now instead of just 2 pieces. Once I do that, remember 1/4 of the remainder, so just one of those 4 pieces, was spent in another shop. And then it says he had $90 left. So he spent the first chunk in one shop, he spent that little piece in the next shop, and then the remaining 3 little pieces that I haven't labeled yet, that's his $90 that they're telling me he has left. And they're saying, how much money did he have at first? Which is the total bar, or the top. What's it all worth? What did he have before he spent any money? So first of all, let's write our answer sentence for that. Max had blank dollars at first. That's our target. We got to figure out how much he had before he spent any money. Now, to solve this problem, you want to start with the thing you know. And you know that he had $90 left. How much money do you know on the model? I know that $90 is right here. That $90 is broken into 3 units, those little tiny units that I made. So I'm going to start with that. 3 units is worth $90. Always try to figure out what 1 unit is worth. How much is one of those little tiny boxes worth? So, of course, if I'm dividing it out 3 ways, I'm dividing by 3. So I'm dividing 90 by 3. They're each $30. So I'll go ahead and fill that in. Those are worth 30. 30, 30, and 30 is 90. Now, I also know that that unit that was spent in the other shop, that other little unit, that's a 32. But the other units, the ones that were spent in the first shop, those are bigger. Those are worth 2 of those 30, so they're each worth 60. I could fill them in as 60s. Or what I like to do is I like to cut everything so it is at the exact same unit size. So now now I can just fill them in. They're all worth 30, right? Everything's worth 30. And I'm looking for how much money he had at first, which if I count, all the little 30s, there's 10 of them. So that means I'm looking for 10 units, which is simple. I just have to multiply by 10. Since I have what 1 unit is worth, 10 of them is worth 10 times as much. So instead of 30, I'll do 10 times 30, which is 300. And that's how much money he had at first.